the David J. Chukuti Community Room in Millbrae, and in Cabo San Lucas, Baja California, and remotely via Zoom. Let me comment early that I apologize for not being able to be there live. But we had a family event scheduled over a year ago and could not move it. So that's where I'm at in Cabo. But hopefully this will work because we've been practicing to make sure we have the right connections and all. I am participating remotely pursuant to Government Code Section 54953 Paren B Paren, which allows remote participation if the teleconference location is identified in the agenda and the teleconference location is accessible to the public. So joining us today is staff to the roundtable are Kathleen Wentworth, our roundtable coordinator, Diane Estepona, roundtable administrative secretary, Ted Gonzalez, planning department administrative secretary, assisting for tonight, Jean Randell, aviation technical consultant from HMMH, and Joe Check, principal consultant from HMMH. With that, let's move into some of the other participants who are with us tonight. And Ms. Wentworth, could I ask you to please introduce them?
Excuse me. Joining us remotely from the Federal Aviation Administration is Moifer Chin. She's our CEO, our Community Engagement Officer. Welcome, Moifer. And we also have Christian Valdez, from a consultant on the GBAS program that we're familiar with. And I don't see anyone in the room we have here. To my right is Joe Check from HMMH, who will be presenting later in the meeting. To my far right is Matt Friedman, who is with the Chief of the Aeronautics Department office at the California Department of Transportation. And Doug Yakel, SFO Public Information Officer. And who else am I missing? Bert, is there anyone else you'd like to introduce from your team? And is there anyone else online that I failed to introduce? Or Diane, do you see anyone else? Okay.
This is Moifer Chen. I think Favi or Carlette will be joining also from the FAA.
Wonderful. We'll look forward to seeing them. Okay, I think that's it for now, Al.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. And again, I'm guessing this is the first meeting we've had a location in Cabo, but we are a international or at least a large-scale regional organization. So I guess this is this is a good place to mark down. Anyway, as a reminder, tonight's meeting will be a hybrid access. Tonight's meeting will have hybrid access with members attending in person and the public welcome to join in person or remotely. For those attending remotely, we continue to use enhanced Zoom. We will periodically screen and share the names of the attendees. The list of names will display the name, but not the email address entered by each person when signing into the Zoom meeting. So hopefully that will be helpful for a number of people who've asked to be informed as who's on these calls. So with that, we'll now move into the roll call. And Kathleen, could I ask you to proceed with the roll call?
City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors. No response. City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office. No response. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Ivar Sataro, good evening.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors.
Dave Fine, present.
CCAC Airport Land Use Commission.
Carol Ford, present.
Town of Atherton.
Stacy Holland, present.
Thank you. City of Belmont.
Robin Pang, Megan Ayers, present.
Thank you. City of Brisbane.
Terry O'Connell, present.
City of Burlingame.
Ricardo Ortiz, present.
Town of Colma.
Joanne Del Rosario, present.
City of Daly City.
Pamela DiGiovanni, present.
City of East Palo Alto. City of East Palo Alto. City of Foster City.
Sam Hindi, present.
City of Half Moon Bay. No response. Town of Hillsborough. Oops, never mind, Al. You can't be counted. Sorry. City of Menlo Park. City of Menlo Park. City of Millbrae.
Angelina Cahalan, present.
City of Pacifica.
Christine Bowles, present.
Town of Portola Valley? Town of Portola Valley, no response. City of Redwood City?
Kaya Aiken, present.
Thank you. City of San Bruno? City of San Bruno, no response. City of San Carlos? No response expected. City of San Mateo? City of San Mateo? No response. City of South San Francisco?
Mark Nagales, present.
Town of Woodside? No response. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum of 14.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen, appreciate that. So with that, we'll move to the items not on the agenda, and the first thing is the public comment for items not on the agenda. Staff will note any written comments and will allow members of the public to speak. And by the way, for the record, there are no members of the public with me here in Cabo San Lucas who wish to make public comments. So with that, Diane, if you could please both share the list of attendees who are currently on Zoom and advise the public how they may participate during public comment.
Thank you, Chair Royce. One moment while I share the list of attendees. While we get that on Zoom, I will go ahead and present the instructions for those on presenting on Zoom. For those attending the meeting in person, please submit your speaker slips located by the entrance. If you are attending on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comment. During the general public comment period, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click on the raise hand feature to speak on the agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and inform you that you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. So with that, we'll open public comment on items not on the agenda. So anybody in chambers or on Zoom, if you could please indicate, as Diane alluded to, we'll recognize you.
I currently do not have any members of the public here in the room wishing to speak or on Zoom. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment for items not on the agenda, and we'll move to the basic business. First item on the agenda will be setting the agenda and the consent calendar. Are there any comments from the members before we go to public comment? Members of the roundtable on the consent agenda or setting the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go to public comment on the consent agenda. Are there any comments from the public on the consent agenda? Does any member of the committee wish to have any items of the consent agenda removed for separate discussion? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent items 1, 2, and 3. I believe we have to take a roll call vote because it's a Zoom meeting. Is that correct, Kathleen?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. And
Okay, if you could call the roll.
And I heard a motion by Mr. Ortiz. Did I hear a second? Thank you, Ms. Bowles. Sorry, I missed it.
I wasn't loud enough to be heard in Cabo San Lucas.
Okay. Okay, we have, it's been moved and seconded, so Kathleen, if you could please call the roll.
All right. City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors. San Mateo County, City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office, no response. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Aye.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. City County Airport Land Use Commission.
Yes.
Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Aye.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma.
Aye.
City of Daly City.
Aye.
City of East Palo Alto. City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay. Town of Hillsborough.
I believe I can vote now that
You
we
can
have a
vote now.
quorum.
Yes,
Vote
yes,
aye.
Mr. Chair.
I'll vote aye. Yes, I'll vote aye.
City of Menlo Park. City of Millbrae.
Aye.
City of Pacifica. Town of Portola Valley. City of Redwood City. City of San Bruno. City of San Carlos. City of San Mateo. City of South San Francisco.
Aye.
And City of Woodside, Town of Woodside. Motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Wentworth. So thank you. The consent agenda has been approved and the agenda has been set. So with that, we'll move to item number 4. First item on the order of business, approval of chairperson subcommittee assignments. They should be listed in your packet on page 29, a list of the subcommittees and the members. I believe it also might be on your screen, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Or it's probably in your packet, if not on your screen. I'm not going to go over all of them. We discussed this in some detail at the last meeting, but I would note that there's 6 different subcommittees: the technical working group chaired by Sam Hindy, the ground-based noise chaired by Vice Chair Terry O'Connell, legislative chaired by myself, and then the work program and the strategic plan, both chaired by myself, and then the Ad-Hoc portable noise monitoring replacement committee chaired by Terry O'Connell. Does anybody have any corrections to the list? Or does anybody wish to volunteer for any one of these subcommittees? Hearing none, are there any member comments on it before we go to public comment? I see no hands raised based on the screen, although it's hard to see here. I'm sorry about that. And so with that, we'll go to public comment on item 4. And again, as required, let me note there's no members of the public with me here in Cabo. So Diane, do we have any members in chambers or any members on Zoom that wish to comment on the subcommittee assignments?
We do not have any public comment in chambers or in Zoom. Thank you.
Okay, if that being the case, I will close the public comment on item number 4 and will entertain a motion to approve the chairperson subcommittee assignments as listed and as laid out. Do we have a motion to that effect?
So moved. Nagals.
Okay, I didn't hear who did that. Who made the
Nogales.
motion?
Nagals.
Nagals. Okay, and is there a second?
Mr. Pine.
Okay, Dave Pine. Okay, we'll move and second it. So again, because roll call is required, Kathleen, could you please take roll on this?
City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors, City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office, City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission,
Aye.
City and County, San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, CCAG Airport Land Use Commission,
Yes.
Town of Atherton,
Yes.
City of Belmont,
Yes.
City of Brisbane,
Yes.
City of Burlingame,
Yes.
Town of Colma,
Aye.
City of Daly City,
Aye.
City of East Palo Alto, City of Foster City,
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay, Town of Hillsborough,
Aye.
City of Menlo Park, City of Millbrae,
Aye.
City of Pacifica, Town of Portola Valley, City of Redwood City, City of San Bruno, City of San Carlos, City of San Mateo, City of South San Francisco,
Aye.
and Town of Woodside. And your motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kathleen. Appreciate that. So let's go to the meat of our meeting tonight, the presentations. And we have 6 different presentations tonight. Typical with what we've done in the past, our procedure, we'll take public comment after all the presentations have been made. But following each presentation, there'll be an opportunity for members to ask clarifying questions and make comments and get further updated on those items that they have an interest in particular. We're going to start with the FAA update. And I believe Ms. Chin is going to be speaking. Is that correct?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I've got a couple of items that I'd like to share with you, might be of interest. The first item is on April 17th, 2024 at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The FAA Office of Next Gen will host a public webinar on advanced air mobility community engagement. No registration is required, and it will be on YouTube. I'm happy to share that with Kathleen after this meeting. The other item is the FAA also has created a new webpage dedicated to sustainable aviation fuels as a helpful resource for the public, aviation industry, and all stakeholders. And I will pass that information along to Kathleen as well. Those are all the updates I have.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. I appreciate that, and I'm particularly looking forward on the webinar on the 17th. Let me open up to the members if they have any questions or comments on the update by Ms. Chen on the FAA activities. And Kathleen, you're going to have, or Terry, you're going to have to help me. I can't see the hands raised, so if you could recognize anybody with hands raised, I'd appreciate it.
I am not seeing any members of our board with their hands raised at this time.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 6 then. And again, Ms. Chen, appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is found on page 30 of your packet. It's Airport Land Use Planning and Preparing for Advanced Air Mobility by Matthew Friedman. Mr. Friedman is the chief of the Office of Aviation Planning in the Caltrans Division of Aeronautics. He's a native of Burlingame, California, and has earned degrees in biology, anthropology, and regional planning, and is an ordained rabbi. As office chief, Mr. Friedman oversees a statewide airport area land use planning that includes providing guidance to airport land use commissions and local agencies. Current projects include the California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook and the California Aviation System Plan. He participates in activities related to advanced air mobility and research projects pertaining to assessing locations of potential vertiport sites. As a personal note, I heard Mr. Friedman speak recently at the UC Davis Aircraft Noise and Emissions Seminar, and I'm delighted he has agreed to speak with us here tonight. This is a topic that, as you remember, we're trying to do a series of different speakers on to give us a broader perspective and a greater awareness of this, because this is an emerging issue for us. So with that, Mr. Friedman, let me turn the floor over to you. I'm not able to hear anything. Is Mr. Friedman
It'll be just
there?
a moment. We're just doing the microphone.
Are we on?
Oh, good. Oh,
Okay. I'm gonna
Yeah.
stand up and speak from here. That's a little easier, and I could, sitting in the back, it's hard to see everybody. So I could just look out and see everybody gathered today. And it's truly an honor to be here for so many reasons. First of all, the topic is important. It's the opportunity to build upon work that we're doing and share some information. But also, it's a bit of a homecoming. As mentioned, I grew up in Burlingame, was born at Peninsula Hospital, went to local schools, and graduated from this little high school over here and a few blocks away. So to come home is a bit of a homecoming. Also, I'm a former elected school board member, having served two terms, and I was an appointed airport commissioner in Arkansas and an appointed planning commissioner in Missouri. So bounced around a bit, but I'm very glad to be back here in California for the last 25 years. And now with Caltrans for 18 years, and aeronautics coming up in 4 years. And I have to tell you, this has really been the pinnacle and the highlight of my professional career. And to be here is one of those special moments. And part of that is the work that you do, and I have to commend this roundtable for engaging the local communities with the aviation community and with the airport. That's, you move yourself forward in so many ways that you don't realize, but seeing airport communities across the state and also across the country, I can attest that this is a tremendous asset for SFO and your local communities. So I'm going to start and go to the next slide. And I will just read this. I'm not going to really read the slides because they're in the agenda packet, but I can start with a definition of advanced air mobility. So let's go to the next slide. And AAM is a new concept of air transportation using electric vertical takeoff and landing, eVTOL aircraft, to move people and cargo between places not currently or easily served by surface transportation or existing aviation modes. eVTOL aircraft may be powered by hybrid electric systems, batteries, or potentially hydrogen fuel cells. And this is from the National Business Aviation Association, the NBAA, which many will be familiar with that acronym. There are other definitions, including those by NASA. Essentially, it's new aircraft that take off vertically, they move forward. The advantage is that because they are either electric powered or they are potentially hydrogen powered, It consumes less in the way of fossil fuels, and it's a game changer in terms of its sustainability. Also, these aircraft are quieter. And I know later on this evening we'll be hearing quite a bit about the analysis of noise, and that's a very big topic. Just as a side note, having grown up here, even when I was in high school, the noise from SFO was a major issue. And here it is, it's a couple of years since I graduated, and it's still a topic. And I imagine it'll continue to be a topic. But the good news is that progress is being made. Every year we see new engines coming out, we see new propulsion systems, and so that impact is decreasing, which is really good news. Let's jump up to the next slide here. So there's three words that I use often in describing what's happening now. And the first word is convergence, the next word is revolution, and the last word is policy. And I like to think about it as a way of framing our discussion. By the way, am I in the right position for the oh, okay. So I just wonder if people are watching, if... Okay, excellent. No. So what is this idea of convergence? And the convergence is we have topics that are intersecting each other in ways that never intersected before, which gives us opportunities and also challenges. For example, we'll speak in a few moments about the placement of vertiports. And we have airports, and the airports are out there, but vertiports potentially could be in communities. And once a vertiport or a structure is placed into a community, it opens up a whole new realm of discussion in terms of decision making, and that's where everyone who comes from city government is very familiar. It becomes a local land use issue. In the past, airports were distant from the communities, and so whatever happened at the airport really didn't impact the towns. But as the cities have grown, they've come to surround airports across California and other parts of the country. And so it's created new issues because of that proximity. So that's a convergence. And we have discussions about topics that are coming together that never were discussed before at the same time. So the next part is the revolution. The revolution is that this is happening very quickly. So not quite 2 years ago, over at SFO at the Hyatt, we had a conference called The Future of Aviation. It was put on between Caltrans Aeronautics and UC Berkeley. And I was told, I was still fairly new in the office, hey, Matt, you're in charge of AAM. Okay, great. I'm thinking the Jetsons and toy drones. I was wrong. When I got there and was hearing about all sorts of amazing developments and progress in aircraft, and frankly, it blew me away. And not a day goes by that something different changes, something new emerges. And this discussion we're having here, I guarantee in 6 months, is going to be different as it was 6 months previous. So that's the revolution. And here's the fun part about a revolution.
I hate to interrupt. Something happened to the volume and now I can hardly hear you. This is Moyfair Online.
Thank you, Ms. Chin. We're gonna change microphones right now. Let us know how it goes.
Okay, are you hearing now?
Yes, thank you.
So the revolution, it happens generationally or maybe less often. If we think of aviation, we had the initial launch of aviation back in 1903 with the Wright brothers, and we moved from wooden aircraft to metal aircraft, and we were piston powered for many years, and then we had the jet age. And with each of these developments, the field changed dramatically. Then we had, soon after the introduction of the jet age, we had the jumbos, the 747s, the L-1011s, that made it affordable for a greater part of the population to travel by air, and it became ubiquitous. 1978, with airline deregulation, even more so, with the rise of the various types of low-cost, ultra-low-cost carriers and so forth, where taking a plane trip was no longer something where you dressed up like this with a suit and tie on. It was an everyday affair. And we're in that midst of another revolution now with the development of AAM that is going to change drastically how we review and look at air travel. And it's raising more questions more rapidly than we can, at times, get a firm grasp on. And that's the third part, which is policy. I say policy/ethics. And oftentimes we have discovered that every time we have a new technology, the policy lags behind and the ethics lag behind, regardless of what that technology happens to be. And it is crucial, now that we are aware when we look at in the past, that sometimes technology wasn't handled as well as it could have been. Let's not make errors as were done in the past. And in a future slide, you'll see the word infrastructure trauma. The term infrastructure trauma refers to facilities that caused harm in their construction. And probably the best example of that would be the Interstate and Defense Highway System that was built starting in 1956. And the best example I can think of is along the Embarcadero in San Francisco, where we had this double-deck freeway going past the Ferry Building, and it was originally going to go all the way through past Fisherman's Wharf up to the Golden Gate Bridge. And in 1959, there was the freeway revolt, and people said, no, this is going to be awful. We don't want this structure to be built. In 1989, we had the Loma Prieta earthquake, and part of that earthquake collapsed, or part of that freeway collapsed, and the decision was made, let's just take it down and make a grand boulevard, and that's what happened. And I think we've all probably driven along that stretch, and it's one of the most visited and beautiful parts of San Francisco. But worse than that, there were times when the interstate system was driven through the core of our major cities, and often it went through communities of color and separated and even destroyed communities. And we have to be sure when we build the system that supports AAM that we don't do that we do it with thoughtfulness, and we do it in a way that presents opportunities for everybody. And I'll touch on that in a few slides. Let's go back to, where are we? Okay, what's the slide before that? Let's go back a couple more. Okay, let's see, too far. Go forward one, and the next. Okay, we talked about that. The next slide. So this is a picture of an aircraft, an AAM aircraft. It's built by Joby Aircraft. There are several manufacturers in California building these aircraft: Archer, Joby, Whisk. Joby has headquarters in San Carlos, which Carol could speak about, also in Santa Cruz, and at the Marina Airport. I have seen this aircraft fly. I have photos on my phone, I have videos. So it exists. And that tells us two things. On the one hand, this is really cool. On the other hand, these manufacturers are going to want to sell these and have them flying places. The Joby aircraft and the Archer aircraft are currently undergoing airworthiness certification by the FAA, and there's thought that maybe within a year or two that they'll receive that certification, and the investors and manufacturers are going to want to see these aircraft deployed. We'll talk a little bit about where they will go in a few moments. Let me go on to the next slide. And this is just a definition. I'm not going to go through all the acronyms, but it's in the agenda packet explaining some of the acronyms on this topic. Let's go to the next slide. So what do we do at Caltrans? You're probably going, okay, nice little intro, but what does it matter to you? So in Caltrans, in the Division of Aeronautics, we have 3 offices. We have the Office of Airports, and we have 6 pilots who inspect every California public use airport and every heliport every year. And these inspections will look at topics such as pavement quality, lighting, signs, obstructions, and so forth. And the pilots will go compose a report, and they'll share it with the airport manager, and with the expectation that the deficiencies will be remedied. And the truth is that these guys are the most powerful people in all of Caltrans because they can shut down an airport. And it's happened. And they say, those trees are too big, you guys got a week to cut them down. And if you don't, we'll pull your permit. And it has happened. The whole point is safety. And that's Caltrans' major goal, is safety and making sure our airports are functional and are well maintained is a top priority. The next office we have is the Office of Technical Services. And this office puts together the capital improvement program on a cycle every couple of years, and they also run a grants and loans program. So the airports are familiar with those funding sources. And finally is the Office of Planning. That's the office I have the honor of chairing and being chief. And we direct airport land use planning. And I know we have the Airport Land Use Planning Commission represented well here, and that's really where all of you come into intersection with us probably the most, I would imagine. So we have one major responsibility with regard to that, and that is the writing and updating of the California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook. We just call it the handbook. And what the handbook describes, as based on the Public Utilities Code and the State Aeronautics Act, is that each airport in California will establish an airport land use commission. Well, I take that back. All but a very few number of airports have a land use commission. And that commission's job is to compose an airport land use compatibility plan, or ALUCP, and then to review development proposals. Now, here's a fact that a lot of people don't realize. The airport land use compatibility plan is the superior planning document. Everything must be in compatibility with that plan, including general plans, specific plans, as well as individual development proposals. And so when the development proposal comes before the commission, they will review it in light of safety and noise in particular, and find that the proposal is either compatible or not compatible. If it's compatible, it goes back to the planning authority, a city or a county, and follows that procedure that's established within the community zoning code and so forth. If it's found to be incompatible, the local planning authority, a city or a county, can overrule the Airport Land Use Commission based on a vote and after a public hearing. And looking around this room, I can tell you that many cities in this room have overruled their Airport Land Use Commission, and sometimes contentiously so. So why is that? I'll give an example of where some of that conflict comes, is having two competing needs. And I'll use Tan Friend as an example, and a biotech development right over here on Millbrae Avenue. So in San Bruno, there was a concern of reaching the regional housing allocation, the RHNA requirements for new housing. And Tan Friend was proposed as a redevelopment location for perhaps 3,500 units, would meet all of the expectations for San Bruno. And so, okay, it's next to BART, it's next to Samtrans, it's next to El Camino, 380, 280, 101. It's well located. It's near employment centers. Is what it looks like to be a perfect location for development of housing. Except airplanes coming out of SFO go right over that. And we're well familiar with the challenges of airplanes, not just from a noise standpoint, but also from a safety standpoint. And so Caltrans' reaction was, this is not a compatible land use. And one of my staff saw this coming through, and we immediately engaged with the FAA and with the airport about this. The airport wrote a fairly lengthy, detailed, and specific reaction to this proposal. And we said, folks, you know, we have to look at safety. We also recognize the need for places for people to live, but they need to be a safe place and a place that's comfortable. The city of San Bruno elected to overrule the commission, and I'm not sure the status of the project right now. Similarly, Millbrae, right here on Millbrae Avenue, proposal to put a biotech facility along Millbrae Avenue, and one would think this is the Bay Area, it's the heart of Silicon Valley, we're leading the world in creativity. And Millbrae wants to develop economically, but Millbrae it's not a large city, and there aren't that many places to expand and to redevelop old land or establish new facilities. And so the city of Millbrae proposed construction of a biotech facility. We said, hey, we don't agree with that, again, because of it's within one of the primary safety zones. But the city went ahead and overruled. So those are just two examples. So we see competing needs. We see Millbrae trying to do economic development and all that it brings to the community. We see San Bruno trying to provide housing. At the same time, from our perspective, we look at the larger issue of safety, which includes noise as an example. So the handbook that you see there, it's reachable by our website, and you could take that from the agenda packet as well. We're in the process of revising that. We have a contract with UC Berkeley to look over more recent crash data from the National Transportation Safety Board, and that's the basis of the safety zones. Essentially, the higher the risk of an aircraft crash, the greater the restrictions. And so as the distance from the end of our side of our runway becomes greater, there are lesser restrictions on that land use. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not very far from the side or an end of a runway to a location where there's land available for either greenfield development or for redevelopment. So using the data that we were getting from UC Berkeley, we discovered that we're not going to change those safety zones very much. They're going to be perhaps one safety zone enlarged by 300 feet. So it's not a big change, which validates the earlier research. It also makes it a little easier for everybody knowing that they could pretty much follow with what they're doing. And we'll be also looking at other elements of the handbook to bring it up to date. We held engagement sessions with some of our stakeholders to see what are people's needs. So we're going to make the new handbook user-friendly, not just to the commissions, but to other users of it, in particular local planners and local decision makers, board members, boards of supervisor members and city council members. Let's go to the next slide. So I spoke about land use planning in California already, so we can go beyond that, pretty much what we just spoke about a few moments ago. Let's go to our next slide. Let's see. And I'm going to grab my cheat sheet. I have all died, so I have to look at a hard copy. So 3 items here. One is we need to plan for AAM in light of what we spoke about a few moments ago, which was avoiding infrastructure trauma and making sure that whatever system comes about for AAM is done in a way that is accessible and beneficial to all. And that's going to be it's not an easy task, but we need to keep that in mind. And indeed, we do that with all our modes of transportation as well, but we have to do it with AAM because it is so new. And to come up with somewhat of a system of AAM, it's all very nascent. So I'm speaking very generally here, but that's because it's so new. The aircraft are just coming online, and the routes are still being described. What I can share with you is a project being done by the California State Transportation Agency, or CalSTA, under SB 800, Senate Bill 100, which is looking at potential corridors for the deployment of these aircraft, and we're about ready to receive a major deliverable from the consulting firm, which is Mead & Hunt, one of the colleagues of HMMM? I'm getting that wrong. HMMH. So they're a colleague firm to HMMH. In fact, I think you may even have a role in this study. And that's forthcoming. I don't have a whole lot of details on it yet, but they're looking at potential corridors and ways to develop it and come up with a 3-year work plan for the development of AAM in California. So in some ways, my office is just getting ready to really get going on some of this topic. It'll be very exciting. Okay, let's go on to our next slide. So, adequacy of existing guidance. Let's talk a little bit about noise, but not too much because there's a presentation after me. Right now, 65 decibels is the way we measure and create a contour for what's acceptable noise. And the challenge there is this guidance was written about 40 years ago. And the sophistication of the measurement of noise has increased, as we'll hear more about in a few moments. And we're also more aware that it's not just the loudness of the noise, but how noise affects somebody. And we all know intuitively that certain sounds are more annoying and distressing. And when it comes to aircraft, how they work will have different types of noise. Recently, a study was completed looking at hummingbirds. And the study was looking at the movement of the wings, the speed of the movement, the angle of the wings, and the different sounds it produced. And it based it on the idea that hummingbirds generally make a pleasing sound, but what are the factors that make that sound one that is appealing to us? We don't find annoyance hearing a hummingbird buzz around. But we could also point to other noises that we encounter every day in the environment that we do find annoying. How does that then apply to the regulation of aircraft? So it's all very new territory, but it's exciting stuff going on, and I look forward to the presentation after this one. So these are some of the factors that we're going to consider and look at as we not just continue to develop our guidance, but also prepare the guidance that we offer to the communities represented here. Let's go on to the next slide. So placement of vertiports. This is a big hot topic. So a vertiport is like a heliport. It's where these vertical takeoff and landing aircraft will land, and where do we put them? So initially, it's highly likely that the initial flights will go between airports, because airports exist and airports have aircraft, and it's not such a big topic to continue to have aircraft at airports. But what do we do if we want to put a vertiport in a community? Last summer, I was attending the Electric Vehicle Symposium, had a meeting in Sacramento, the statewide, actually it's an international meeting, take it back. And there were vendors out there selling charging stations. Imagine most of our city and county representatives have dealt with different types of charging station technologies and where to put them. Well, all these vendors are there, and I spoke to one of them. They said, oh yeah, we know these parking lot companies are buying up land and they're gonna put a vertiport there. They just take down all the light poles and they'll repaint it and stripe it and put in a charging station, and poof, you have a vertiport. And I said, well, not so fast. Just like when I spoke to the aircraft manufacturers, I said, are you aware of local zoning codes and the need for use permits, which everyone at this table is familiar with? And it's deer in the headlights. So again, that's the convergence going on, but it's also new territory. So the placement of vertiports is brand new, and we are just now really beginning to look into that into greater depth. And I'm excited that be able to share some of these facts with you now and continue that discussion. So let's go to the next slide. Last year, about a year and a half ago now, Caltrans sponsored a study with San Jose State University using the Bay Area as a case study for the placement of vertiports. And using publicly accessible census data, so it's easy to replicate the study, and other publicly accessible sources, they looked at not just potential air corridors, but also locations for the placement of vertiports. And they looked at San Jose being a suburban area, San Francisco being a more intense urban area, and Livermore being a somewhat rural area. And we established a number of parameters, including access to transit and so forth, and they're all contained in this study that's quoted here. And what was surprising is, take a guess which of those three areas had the most viable location, commercial properties to be transitioned to a vertiport. Livermore, San Jose, San Francisco. What would be your first guess? Wrong. San Francisco. Number 2 was San Jose, and Livermore was the third. So of all the commercial parcels in Livermore, the ones that were found acceptable by this set of standards, Livermore had 3 spots, that's it. San Francisco had over 200, I don't remember the exact, I think about 40 something for San Jose. So very much didn't seem to match up, but when we look at the parameters and creating the layers of suitability, and this was done using a GIS tool. It's really fairly simple. I think anyone who's gone to planning school and graduate school or even undergrad does constraint mapping and constraint for slope or water or whatever you want to constrain for, and then you get the suitable building area. The same process was done with the placement of vertiports. So this study is available, and I think the website is there. If you get a chance to read it, it's maybe 20, 30 pages. Doesn't take a long time to read, but it's very informative. This is kind of a beginning. There's going to be more studies like that as we begin to winnow down what would be good places to do it. And as friends of mine will tell you, yeah, I walk around picking on placing vertiports all over the place, just as a kind of a fun hobby, but it's not an easy task. And it's not as easy as the aircraft manufacturers envision it to be, or these parking lot owners either. And that's good, because it means that the community is going to be thinking, what are the impacts? Can people get to them? What is the noise level going to be? For example, Joby Aircraft mentioned that their aircraft produce 65 decibels at 500 feet. So that means essentially you need a 500-foot buffer around the vertiport when you're in the vicinity of residential housing. If it's a commercial area, you're probably going to be a little more flexible. But imagine how large that space would be, that you can find adequate land where you don't have any kind of conflicting land uses. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm not going to go through all of this here, but there's a number of different issues for the different communities who are making decisions, for planners and also for members of planning commissions and city councils, county boards of supervisors, and the general citizenry. When we had gone over and produced our California Aviation System Plan a couple of years ago. One of the commission members from the California Transportation Commission said, what is your engagement with community-based organizations? And she wasn't so much speaking to the vertiports and AAM, this is more of a general topic, but it raised the issue that there are many interest groups in California in particular. We live in a very vocal and engaged society, which is an asset to California. It just makes it more of a challenge to those of us who are engaged in making those decisions and coming up with solutions. And I think, oh, there's one more document I want to point out. And this document is so new, it wasn't in the presentation because it wasn't available when I made the presentation. It's called the Planning for Advanced Air Mobility, and it's published by the American Planning Association. I have one copy here, and whoever gets there first is welcome to take it back to your planning department. And it was written by Adam Cohen and Yolanka Wolf. Yolanka Wolf is executive director of the Community Air Mobility Initiative, and she educates planners and other decision makers and professionals regarding advanced air mobility. Yolanka and I keep on running into each other at the same meeting and being on the same panel sometimes, but it's bringing this new technology in and doing it in the best way possible. Adam Cohen is a researcher at UC Berkeley. He's actually the contract manager for our review of the planning handbook and a number of other projects. And again, he's very in tune, and we kind of make the circuit. And that's, again, being here is part of that opportunity to engage and inform and learn from those that we speak to. I think, that may be the last slide. Okay, so those are some of the other sources that I've spoken about and that are available. They're all accessible through the websites. And then again, I'll leave this hard copy here. Let me put it right over. I'll make it a fair grab. I'll put it right over here. And Brandon is also the NASA document that you can reach through the website as well. With that, do we take questions now or at the end of the presentations?
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. That was very informative. I think we have time for a couple questions, Sarah. And so are there any members that would like to follow some questions or observations based on Mr. Friedman's presentation?
Through the chair, we have a question from a member, Carol Ford.
Please, Carol, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. It says discussion.
Carol.
Oh, sorry. Is this on?
Yes.
Thank you. It says, what are your immediate local concerns and issues with AAM? My concern is separation from general aviation aircraft, because how are these vehicles going to be under positive control from air traffic control? Are they going to be talking to towers at San Carlos or SFO? How does this work?
Carol, I'm really glad you asked that question.
Good.
So what goes on in the sky is a purview of the FAA. And the FAA is yet to really fully define how that's going to happen, not just for these aircraft, but also for drones. And one of the concerns people have is as the number of flights become more numerous, whether it's a drone aircraft, a smaller drone aircraft, or a larger aircraft that's carrying people or cargo, it can become very crowded. And at this point, I don't have an answer to that other than to say that's a real concern. We have a phrase at Caltrans that our jurisdiction is as high as a blade of grass, and then it's the FAA. And what we hear from the FAA is they're kind of squirming because they work awful hard to control airspace that we have already, whether it's at a GA airport or a commercial service airport. So how it's going to play out with regard to these new aircraft and routing, scheduling, airspace deconfliction, what I can tell you is there's work going on using AI as a potential tool. We know that's a bit of a technological controversy as well as a policy controversy. I wish I knew the answer, or I wish I could give you a better answer, but we'll see. Carol, I suspect you've delved into this topic because clearly your question indicates some knowledge there.
Thank you. I've been concerned about this issue for a long time.
And I think we all share that concern. And airspace is always a concern because, as I tell folks, All we need is 2 of these aircraft to collide over a schoolyard, and all this progress will grind to a halt. And we can't have 1 mistake. It has to be 0 mistakes. Sir?
Thank you. I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Mr. Chair, through the chair,
Yes.
one more member has a question. Mr.
Yes,
Wallace.
please.
Thank you for bringing that point up, because when I was reading your presentation, you brought up local concerns. And I think one of the things you're going to see, or we're going to see, is that you're going to have some cities that might be more supportive than others. And the residents are going to obviously have a say in terms of if they're going to want this. And so kind of the local control conversation, I think, is going to happen. And so it's going to be kind of interesting to see how cities react to this.
And they're all going to be different, because every city has its own personality and its own constituencies and its own concerns. Having been a planning commissioner and sat on a planning commission, as every one of us has probably been exposed to planning commission deliberations or council or board of supervisor commissions, it becomes very individual. And I was speaking with a fellow from Joby, and I said, well, imagine you go to a city council meeting, you do a beautiful presentation, you've got graphics, you've got a model, it's ooh and ah, and everybody's very impressed and interested in that. And the chair of the planning commission is sitting there, and the commissioner next to the chair says, hey, you know, I hear your spouse doesn't sleep well at night. Would these keep your spouse up? Good point made by you. Maybe we don't want these here, and next you know they're voted down that quickly. And it becomes a local concern. So you're absolutely right, and it's a bit unpredictable, but that's the joy of local government, isn't it?
We have one more
Okay.
question.
Kathleen, we have time for 1 more question. If you
Yes.
could, is anybody, okay?
This is an open-ended question and there's limited time, but could you talk a little bit about ethics? The third thing was planning/ethics. So can you just talk briefly about what are some of your ethical concerns?
So some of the ethics are impacts of the aircraft, such as noise, light, because we know from helicopter landings they're going to put on lights coming down if nighttime operations. Access is a really big one. That's one of the parameters with the San Jose State study, is that if it only becomes a tool available to the very wealthy, then many people are impacted by its presence, but few feel the benefits of it. And the question comes in, well, how much will it cost and who will be able to get there? And like any technology, it's initially going to be more expensive. If you think of an automobile with the backup cameras, initially they were in the high-end automobiles, and now they're pretty much present in all. Even air conditioning and power brakes and automatic transmissions at one point were the high-end items. Likely it'll go the same way with AAM. So, but it's still a valid concern of who gets to fly in these airplanes. And AAM will not solve all our congestion problems. It will not solve all of our problems with greenhouse gas emissions. It will contribute to solving those problems. What AAM has the potential to do, though, is give greater access to remote areas that don't have good service. So imagine medical transportation of blood products or drugs or equipment or even sick patients in a way that's more easy to accomplish than a helicopter. It also then is able to enlarge the use of our general aviation airports. So my prediction, again, this is not Caltrans, this is just Matt Friedman talking, is we're going to see this deployment initially between airports, and we're going to see it between GA airports as well as commercial service airports. GA airports, general aviation airports to some degree have a little more flexibility because there is not the same intensity of flight activity, although some of our GA airports have higher flight levels than the commercial service airports. I think it'll start with medical, again, because in general, the community is more interested in medical services. And I was a bit flippant at a conference a few months ago. I said, it's all about grandmas and babies. That if you save a grandma or a baby, everyone goes along with it. Having grown up next to Peninsula Hospital, we'd hear the helicopters coming in there. We knew it was a big deal. If there was a helicopter that came into the hospital, somebody's life was in danger, and nobody gave it a second thought regardless of the noise generated. These aircraft are much quieter, so when we begin with medical flights and people realize, hey, this is something I can put up with, it's going to increase public interest, and it will advance the whole notion. There are other, there's a whole host of policy and ethical issues. Is there anything in particular that you'd like me to speak to? Okay.
Okay, with that, Mr. Friedman, I want to thank you for your time. It's very interesting, very informative. I think what we're getting from these presentations is the complexity of the problem, how rapidly it's moving, and the lots of moving parts, all the different parts to it. We have a couple more presentations over the course of our meeting this year. We're going to try to identify what our concerns are. Yes.
I'd like to make an offer to our municipalities and the counties here that we're available to do presentations and discussions with all of you and your planning staff, and we would welcome it because we want to work in partnership. That we view aviation as important, but we also view the needs of the community as just as important. And the 4 pillars of Caltrans are safety, number 1, climate adaptation, equity, which I didn't mention by name yet, but this fairness to all, and lastly, economic development. Those are the 4 core principles that we work on, and I imagine it's similar for our communities as well. But thank you for the opportunity to be here with you tonight, and I'll stick around for questions after the meeting as well.
Through the chair. Chair?
Yes, I don't see who.
It's,
yes.
Sam Hindi, Foster City. Is there time for a couple quick
questions? Yes, I said. I'm sorry?
Is there time for 2 quick questions?
I did. If you can make them brief. I don't want to stifle discussion, but I also cognizant of the fact we're behind schedule here. But please, Sam, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Quick question for you. You mentioned your main focus is safety. I'm assuming this is based on the land and the FAA is dealing with the air safety. Is that Caltrans? What part of safety are you in charge of?
So the land use planning handbook that we put out limits development land use based on the risk. And so that's pure safety. So as I tell folks this in a nutshell, we don't put a hospital at the end of a runway. And so the farther away a proposed land use is from the end of a runway to the side of a runway, the lesser the risk. So that's where the safety comes in. We don't regulate aircraft or operations. That's not our purview. What we do is we look at the condition of airports. Our aviation safety officers will do the inspections for the integrity of the pavement, the lighting, and the markings. And then we in planning are really looking down the road to ensure that whatever is constructed is safe. We also, the FAA conducts obstruction analyses and so forth. So that's our main piece on safety.
Thank you. A quick follow-up on that. You mentioned noise as well. How do you handle noise? Is that Caltrans will deal with any noise?
Well, in the context of aviation, the book stipulates the establishment of noise contours at the 65 CNL level. And the standard is that housing can't be in a noise area that exceeds 65 decibels. Now, does it happen? It does when it's either the local authority will override the Airport Land Use Commission, or the local community will require mitigation through the installation of thicker walls and special glass, which I know it's been done up here in Millbrae for years. So it's possible to mitigate against some of those impacts. The question that comes up, and this is what happened with Tanforan, is you can mitigate those new buildings so that the sound inside is well within expectations, but nobody sits in their house all day long. No. And that's where the concern comes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Appreciate the questions. Those were very, very good questions. Mr. Friedman, again, I want to extend our thanks to you, and I appreciate the invitation to be available to meet with different city councils. This is an issue I'm sure the different towns and the county, as well as our partners, the FAA and the SFO and India, et cetera, all will be dealing with over the next year or two, and probably longer. So I appreciate you helping us increase our awareness of some of the concerns and the Caltrans role in it. So thank you. With that, we're going to move to the next item on the agenda, and that could be found on page 46 of your packet. and that's dealing with the study comparing the FAA AEDT modeling data versus that measured noise data. Some of you may remember receiving the weekly airport noise report, which featured a recently released scientific study comparing the FAA AEDT noise modeling program with actual noise monitoring measurements and finding there was a difference that existed. We have Mr. Check from the principal consultant at HMMNH here, and he'll explain this more and answer any questions we might have. So with that, Mr. Check, if I could turn the floor over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're trying to get the presentation up. Okay, I see it there, but I don't see it there.
Sorry. Do you have? Okay. Go.
Here we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kathleen, for inviting me to the roundtable. Kathleen asked that we summarize a recently completed study by Stanford and NASA's JPL titled Large-Scale Validation Study of Aircraft Noise Modeling for Airport Arrivals. So before I jump in, I'd like to thank my HMMH colleagues who helped with this presentation, Dave Crandall, Ria Hanrahan, and Gene Reindell, as you all know. Next slide. So the study that we're talking about is pictured here, the first page of it on the left-hand side. The analysis was a comparison of measured sound levels to modeled sound levels predicted with the FAA's Aviation Environmental Design Tool, or AEDT. That's the FAA's model to assess fuel burn, emissions, and noise. And this study was focused on noise from aircraft arriving San Francisco runways 28L and 28R. The results, if summarized in a very small nutshell, was that the measured single event sound levels were approximately 1 to 4 dB higher on average than those predicted by the AEDT. And just a clarification, HMH did not participate in this study. Just so you all know, we're trying to create a objective view of it. So the next slide is my agenda for our presentation this evening, basically to give you some bottom line upfront numbers and details of the study, tell you about the study in a little bit more detail as far as go into what it actually looked at, and then cover the last several slides are about responses and observations for the study. On the right-hand side is one of the screenshots from the paper. By the way, this was a paper published in the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America. And the slide is showing flight tracks into SFO, and the circles with the blue dots are the 2 noise monitoring terminals that they analyzed. Next slide. So study's bottom line up front, they looked at 2 modes of AEDT. Instead of using abbreviations, I decided to call them regulatory mode and non-regulatory mode. So in regulatory mode, and I'll define that in just a moment in a slide or two, that AEDT underpredicted for sound exposure level and maximum sound level, that's SEL and LMAX. And you can see the numbers on the slide. SEL was underpredicting by 1.8 to 2.4 decibels. LMAX was underpredicted by 3.5 to about 3.6 decibels. And the rightmost column is a uncertainty or standard deviation of the mean of those levels. And that standard deviation ranged from plus or minus 2.3 dB to plus or minus 2.8 dB. And SEL and LMAX, as you might understand, are the building blocks of the cumulative noise metrics that we deal with for noise impact, like Mr. Friedman was mentioning, the day-night average sound level that's used in the other 49 states, and the community noise equivalent level, CNEL, that's used here in California. So those are both building blocks of those cumulative metrics. So if the SEL is underpredicted, so will the CNEL, but only if arrivals are the dominant CNEL contributor is what we can take away from this study so far. So that was the regulatory mode. And on the next slide was some of the results from the, oh, I'm sorry, let's go back one slide. The claim there then from the paper was that AEDT has substantial prediction errors on approach trajectories and cannot be considered a reliable methodology for predicting valid aircraft noise impact. That's the quote that's on the slide. Okay, so that was regulatory mode. Move to non-regulatory mode. It also, AEDT also underpredicted the aircraft for SEL of 1.6 to 2.7, Lmax from about 3 dB or so, with standard deviations of 2 to 3 dB, plus or minus. And the claim there then for this mode was AEDT does not adequately account for increased noise levels with increased calibrated airspeed from auxiliary high-lift equipment and landing gear deployment. They mentioned that they claim that the accuracy is unknown for AEDT, noise power distance curves, those are the underlying database of the model, and that AEDT lacks knowledge of the aircraft's weight and thrust when this auxiliary lift equipment is deployed, and it also lacks knowledge of weather and atmospheric conditions at the time of the aircraft operation. So, going into more study details then of what was actually covered in the study. Again, arrivals to San Francisco. Oh, sorry, next slide.
One more.
Arrivals to San Francisco, runways 28L and 28R. It was over a 12-month period from July
One slide.
One more slide.
Yep. Yep, thank you. Covered over a 12-month period from July of 21 to June of 22. And that over that 12 months, it looked at 175,000, about 175,000 usable pairs of predictions versus measurements at portable sound level meters at 2 sites. Again, that same graphic I showed you on the earlier slide is here. And those 2 prediction modes, the regulatory mode was using what's called the base of aircraft data, or BADA 3, whereas the non-regulatory mode, what was called in the paper ADT-AE, was using a more recent database called BADA 4. Next slide. So Site 12 was one of the sites that was used in the study. Is SFO NMT 12 there. It's in the bottom right-hand corner of the map that is on the slide. It is shown in the San Francisco quarterly reports as Site 12 Foster City. And again, it was that period of July 21 through June 22. It's COVID period, by the way. And the aircraft CNEL was reported by that site as about 61 decibels of CNEL. Site 12 is just over 6 miles from the end of runway 28. And the estimated altitudes of the aircraft there are 1,700, 1,800 feet. And that's because they're basically, at that point, hooking up with the glide slope of the runways. And so that's right about the final approach fix of runway 28, and so they start down the glide slope there, just about that site. All right, next slide. And another site they looked at was called SIDBI, and it's kind of depicted on the approach plate that's shown on the right-hand side of the slide, that one that's circled in red. And it's a monitoring location near that fix. The fix is about 17.5 miles of flight distance from the end of runway 28. It's in the approximate area of Palo Alto. At SIDBI, aircraft must be 4,000 feet or above. And then as they come into San Francisco and intersect the runway heading there at the fix called He-Man, the aircraft must be about 3,100 feet and above. And then at Duyet, which is the final approach fix, which is about where Site 12 was, the aircraft must be at 1,800 feet or above. And that 1,800 makes for a 3-degree glide slope down to the runway. So what did the FAA say about this? Next slide. So the FAA, again, responded to the study here in the Airport Noise Reporter, the edition of March 22nd. And basically they said, as the title of the slide says, too narrow to draw broad conclusions. The study was sponsored by the FAA, though, and this research was under the Aviation Sustainability Center, or ASCENT, project number 53. In fact, FAA is further funding Project 53 to examine noise from departure operations, and it's also funding other ascent analyses of operational noise at different airports to expand the coverage of the study. Basically taking a quote, as they were quoted in ANR there, the Airport Noise Reporter, while we view Project's 53 initial results as useful, they are too narrowly focused to draw broad conclusions regarding the overall accuracy of ADT's noise modeling capability and its ability to meet the requirements for which it was developed. Okay, and then 2 weeks later, next slide. 2 weeks later, Vince Mestry, one of the subject matter experts in this area, who's also a contributing editor to the Airport Noise Reporter, had a response that was published. And the main bullets here are on the slide. He said that the authors neglected to mention 2 types of measurement uncertainty. One was about the sound level meters themselves, the microphones and whatnot, the instrument. And another one was contamination of non-aircraft sources occurring simultaneously with aircraft events. And he mentioned some ISO standards and whatnot there. And that the authors also neglected to recognize the regulatory mode does not necessarily model real-world altitude profiles. So the authors then had a rebuttal in the 29th edition, 29 March edition of ANR. They said that, considerable effort was taken to avoid contaminated data, which is heavily applauded, by the way. They did a very thorough job of trying to get rid of contaminated data. In fact, they threw away about 10% of their events that they were using. And so it goes really 200,000 down to about 175,000 pairs there, with some of the analysis they did called goodness of fit criteria and whatnot, which is very commendable. And then from about 7,500 events over a 45-day period, they compared their own sound level meter to a San Francisco sound level meter. And there they found average differences in LMAX and SCL were only about 1/10 of dB different between the 2 sound level meters. So with some standard deviation of about 1.5 dB. So that's very good, but the uncertainty was still 1.3 to 1.5 dB there, even comparing 2 sound level meters side by side. And then the authors also said that ADT has bugs in fitting CDA, continuous descent approaches, 3-degree approaches, profiles to real-world aircraft trajectories. Vince had a reply in that same edition to the rebuttal. Vince said the author's rebuttal didn't address his main points, that ADT is still lacking in he did agree, though, that ADT is lacking in correlating actual thrust with ADT estimates of thrust. All right, so that was FAA and Vince, and on the next slide, HMH also read the paper and created some list of some of our observations. Certainly, it was a large aircraft arrival data sample, full year of data, covered all 4 seasons, but it was at a single airport, San Francisco. Very robust sample, though. We do concur with the stated possible reasons for the differences between ADT and the measurements, being one of them was cited as the noise power distance curves. And, the noise power distance curves are measured under controlled conditions. And the model does use those measurements, but those NPD curves are adjusted and normalized to 160 knots. And they are provided by obviously by the original equipment manufacturers, usually during the certification process. So they're old. Some of that data is old, and the aircraft, as they age, they may sound a little different. I don't think our cars, when they're 15 years old, they probably sound different when they're new. And then the other thing that we did agree with was the airspeed handling in ADT. They rightly identified that as an issue. The NPDs, the noise power distance curves that are in ADT for arrivals are basically, measured, when they were measured by the OEMs, they were measured in what's called the dirty configuration with the gear down and the flaps down. But to change the airspeed from 160 knots, the reference condition, to other conditions, that's where ADT does not have, it just has some simple relationships inside the model to do that. And so that was, rightly identified as a deficiency or something that could be improved in ADT. Another observation was that, we saw that the measurements occurred outside of the typical area of the 65 CNEL contour for SFO. As shown on one of those slides where we showed the contours, the noise monitor, the NMT 12 there was quite outside the contours. And so the reported differences may not exist as they were reported. They may be less if they were closer into the airport. And the measurement occurred at the Sidby area location where it was further out. That is a good area there for looking at flight procedure changes. So next gen and environmental assessments that handle that sort of thing, that's a good site for that. And so we agreed with that site as a good site there. But such analyses there use the altitude control codes when you're doing the modeling, that feature of AEDT, to get the altitudes to better match to the actual flights. And so we would recommend that the modeling be adjusted using the altitude control feature for that regulatory mode. The authors did use the altitude control codes and the speed controls for their non-regulatory analysis with the BADA4 database, but this is not something that one would use for, in practice, to do like air traffic environmental assessments, like for next gen. Next slide. One aircraft that's reported in there was the CL600, the Challenger 600, and it had the highest differences between modeling and measurements of all of them. And it seemed to us to be an outlier, a statistical outlier of the data they looked at. And even though it's great that they included that in their report, I think that it skewed some of the resultant conclusions. And then the modeled aircraft the next bullet, the modeled aircraft may not have been chosen with FAA approved substitutions. What we meant there, that bullet wasn't quite worded the way we wanted it to, come to think of it. And so what we meant to say was that the authors grouped together multiple aircraft types. Any of the rows that you see in the tables in the paper that have a single ANP type or aircraft noise and performance type, and multiple BADA3 types, we think should have been separated. So ideally, they should have been reported the ICAO aircraft type designator, ignoring the original aircraft assignment, disregards the potential for substitution error or bias. So we could have looked at it a little better, I think, had they shown those rows separated out. Last bullet on the slide there, they seem to consult with the FAA and Volpe, which are the originating organizations for the model. But we don't think that, I skipped a bullet, I'm sorry, let me go back one bullet. Tabulated results included some overestimations, right? So there were some times where the measurements were lower than the modeled levels, but that really wasn't mentioned. So, there was like for some of the 747 variants, for example, the overpredictions averaged about 0.6 dB. So I guess the news story there is that AEDT didn't always underpredict. There was some overpredictions. So the authors consulted FAA and Volpe, which is great, and I think the way we wanted to word that bullet was, publishing the work in JASA is great because it's part of a peer review process, and we agree with the authors and Vince Mestre that the presentation at a conference, such as like at an ASA conference, would continue the peer review, as well as what I could suggest, a third-party review would benefit the study of the modeling. And part of the peer review may, part of the peer review process may reveal some minor errors that we caught in the paper. Like, for example, not all data is shown, and some of the tables don't add up as far as the sample sizes that were reported. 1 to 3%, we saw some differences there. And some of the data, like for runway 28R, runway 28L was shown in detail, 28R was not shown in detail, but was shown only in summary fashion. And a couple bullets that aren't on my slide, but I did, as I was going through my presentation, I wanted to mention one of the issues about using BADA3 versus BADA4, those two modes. One thing that we did see as an insight was that BADA4 is not necessarily better than BADA3. BADA4 is supposed to be advanced and more technically advanced, but it wasn't always better. If you look at the Embraer 175 and the 737, which are two of the most frequent aircraft that they studied, BADA4 was actually better than 3 for the Embraer by about 1.5 dB, but BADA4 was worse than BADA3 for the 737-800 by about 2 decibels. So it's important to bring out some of those intricacies when you try to find out what the sources of these errors were. Secondly, one thing else I didn't mention on the slide was that these kinds of modeling errors are important for only about half of the NEPA problem. You know, if you know NEPA, you have to have two things. One is the absolute level at the location that you're studying, and then also the change in noise level. So for sure, these errors that the authors are pointing out are important for the absolute magnitude of the CNEL there at the location, but the modeling errors get washed out. If there are modeling errors, they'll get washed out in a delta situation when you're comparing like a proposed action to like a no action alternative. So they're not that critical there in, they're only critical for half the story there in NEPA. And then lastly, just a concluding remark that the FAA funded research of departures may tell the rest of the story, and we're looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Before we go to member questions or comments, I know Gene Riddell is with us. And Gene, if I could ask you to say a few words, because I know you've done a little bit of looking at this as well.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. First, I want to thank Joe for attending the roundtable meeting tonight and presenting this summary and providing some of the observations, as I'm currently on the East Coast, so I'm pretty late here and could not attend in person. But I do have a few points that I think it's worth pointing out as the technical consultant to the roundtable. The first, I think, is the big one that I want people to resist jumping to conclusions based on the findings. We know that San Francisco arrivals, particularly in the area of the further out measurement sites, side by, are having speed control issues, and as a result, pilots are having to employ speed brakes to slow the aircraft down in order to arrive San Francisco. I think that probably has some role here, and we know that. It would be good to do another study of arrivals at another airport, for example, to see if some of those issues on the speed control of the aircraft on arrival into San Francisco is an issue where maybe at another airport it is not. I wanted to point out and reiterate what Joe said earlier, that HMMH did not participate in this study. We're just trying to provide the roundtable with the information they might want to glean from the study. We do think that there's a lot of, as Joe pointed out, a lot of good points in here, and it does make you obviously question whether the AEDT is accurately able to predict noise levels, especially on arrival into an airport like San Francisco. And the data set used is substantial, and we should not ignore it for sure, and it can help us to do even a deeper dive into trying to understand why there are some of these differences. I think it was pointed out in the paper, and Joe mentioned it, you know, a couple of potential reasons. I think there may be some other reasons as well. So, and in closing, though, I think as your technical consultant, if the roundtable is interested in actually getting a deeper dive into this paper, which I'm not suggesting, as I'm not convinced it is part of the roundtable's current work program to evaluate the accuracy of AEDT, but perhaps if the roundtable is interested, that perhaps the technical working group is the right place, and maybe the TWG can invite the authors from Stanford, NASA to an upcoming meeting of the TWG to present and further discuss these details. So with that, I do want to open it up to questions, and I also understand that one of the authors is attending either in person or virtually and may be able to answer some questions from the members as well. But Joe, again, thank you for being there in my place and for presenting this information. I greatly appreciate it and wish I could be there.
Thank you, Gene. And I was going to note that one of the authors, I think the primary author of the study, Dr. Juan Alonso from the Stanford University, the chair of the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics at Stanford, is available for any questions too, if members would have any. We wanted to bring it to the committee's attention because there's been some publicity around this, been some questions raised. I know a couple of the members have inquired about the validity of the studies and how it impacts the noise monitoring that we're currently doing. And so we wanted to bring you a presentation on exactly what we know about it now. With that, let me open up to the members and see if there's any questions or comments from the members. And Kathleen, I cannot see, so if you see any hands raised, if you could please be so kind as to announce them, that'd be great.
I'm looking around the room and, Mr. Hindi.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for the presentation, Joe and Jean. I kind of agree with Jean that the substantial data set that was in there for a year worth of data and a year of monitoring. And I understand what you talked about, the braking and the reducing of speed over city point, but what would you attribute the difference on monitor 12? Because that's pretty much you at that point gliding through to the airport, more or less.
Yeah, that's the, you know, like the NPD curves might be the source, that they're just not reflective of what they, you know, of current aircraft. But besides that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
If I could add to that a little bit, HMH is probably one of the most predominant users of AEDT. And one of the things that we try really hard at doing is making sure we get the noise model inputs correctly. We have actually found that if you get the inputs correctly, that the outputs generally match better with measurements than without. But you know, we can't answer that question specifically because we didn't review the data, we didn't do the modeling, and that sort of thing. And you know, so it.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Through the chair, Dr. Alonso is in the audience, and perhaps he could answer the question for Mr. Hindi.
Yes, that'd be great. Mr. Alonso?
Thank you.
Would you care to comment?
Yes, he's getting the microphone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for allowing me to answer the question. The noise models in AEDT were actually built when, for an era where the dominant source of noise from aircraft was jet noise. So the exhaust.
A bit closer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So I was saying the AEDT noise model that is well documented was actually created in an era where the majority of the noise radiated from an aircraft to the people below on arrivals was actually from the engine itself. And that's not the case anymore. So one of the main discrepancies that we actually see in both NMT and SciBy is the fact that the airframe noise component is almost entirely neglected. So we were very surprised. We had thought that at SciBy, so farther away from the airport, the noise predictions will be worse. And they were pretty bad, we thought. But we also thought that closer to the airport, at NMT 12, the results will be much better, and they are not.
Right.
That was a surprise to us in the study, with not 10 or 12 or 13 flights, which are the typical studies, but with 175,000 flights, which is a very significant, statistically speaking, data set. So the noise power distance curves are part of the issue. Perhaps the fact that AEDT may be underestimating the weight of the aircraft as it flies over NMT-12 is the other sort of main thing. But the second non-regulatory mode of the study used altitudes and speed controls with the actual, you know, highest fidelity weather and wind database that we could possibly get our hands on. So it is, AEDT in those situations is doing the best it can. We think there are deficiencies in the model, particularly in arrivals, but we were surprised that the deficiencies remain as you got closer to the airport. I think it is entirely possible that within the 65 dB area, the errors will be smaller, but given that they're order 3 dB in NMT-12, they're likely to persist.
Yeah, well, thank you. Mr. Chair, out of respect for everybody's time here today, I'm going to stop here, but I think it really should something that, with your agreement, something that technical working group could have a presentation from the authors of the study and have a deeper dive into it.
Thank you, Mr. Hindy. I think that recommendation is spot on, and I think we will pursue that. Again, I do not want to get in this meeting into a debate over the merits of the study. I just want to bring it to your attention, and as Gene alluded to, try to give you a feel for it. And it's the first, even though it's a fairly elaborate study, it's the first of what might be a couple more that would shed further light on this. So with that, we'll refer this to the TWG. Are there any other member questions or comments? If not, I'm sorry?
Through the chair, Ms. Bowles.
Yes. Yes.
Hi, is this working? Yeah, this is working. I'm just, you mentioned that the departure studies would be happening soon, and I'm just wondering if there's a timeline and whether we know if SFO will be studied as part of that as well.
I believe it is.
Oh, for this year, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's part of the whole same Ascent project too, Ascent 53.
Okay, thank you.
So I have one more question from Ms. Pang Meganaris.
So,
Please, go ahead.
thank you. We know that communities continue to have grave concerns about airport noise. We also have this study with a tremendous data set that suggests that the design tool is under predicting noise levels. So now what? What does the roundtable do with this information?
Is that a Gene question?
I don't know. I mean, what do we do with this?
Well, I think first let's get a further discussion regarding exactly what the study says and doesn't say and limitations. And I think that's probably best done at the subcommittee level, the TWG, which is designed to deal with technical issues like this. And then following that, we can then give some thought as to what next steps might be for us. I think it's premature for us to do anything right now other than understand there's a question that's been raised, a study that's been done, and we need to determine exactly what that study says and doesn't say. I'm cognizant of the comment made by our consultant, Mr. Randell, that we don't prematurely overreact to something until we fully understand it. And so I think that's be our course of action. Open to any comments by the members if they feel differently. And Gene, I see your hand is up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. What I would say is the role of the roundtable is obviously to be sure that the information and the modeling that goes into these analyses is correct, right? And so you would want to support any further action from the FAA to make corrections in the model. HMMH was actually involved in a similar study to this back during the I&M days, the integrated noise model, which was the predecessor to the AEDT, in which we also worked with NASA and found that there were some discrepancies between measured and modeled levels and actually resulted in changes into that integrated noise model to address those changes. So if these changes, if these differences prove to be, and they look like they are differences, because I would also agree with the person that spoke, one of the authors of the study that said that, you know, airframe noise isn't taken into account in AEDT. I would validate that to say that up until the last probably 5 to 10 years, it didn't need to take into account airframe noise because it was all engine noise. That's not the era we live in now, and that it is more airframe noise. But you asked about the role of the roundtable. It's to support and encourage the FAA to get their model to be right.
Thank you, Gene. Appreciate that. Are there any other comments or questions from the members?
Through the chair, Ms. Eakin, Kaya Eakin.
Yes, Kai, please, floor is yours.
Just very briefly, I'm wondering if this study was done during COVID, when there was much less, it was a very different time. There were fewer people on the roads, there were fewer people in offices. Just how we were living was extremely different from normal, and I'm just wondering if that had any impact. I just throw it out there.
Would Dr. Alonso like to respond to that?
We chose 1 year of operations, and it happened to be July 21 to effectively late June 2022. We have the data for years before and years after. We can repeat the studies, but it's a massive amount of computation. However, AEDT protects aircraft noise only. So if you say that we were during COVID and the background noise was lower, that will make the conclusions of the study even more valid, I would say, when they're not polluted with jackhammers and cars and various other things to the level that would be normal. With that said, as I think Joe mentioned, we took extreme care to take many more hundreds of thousands of flights and data points and sort of throw away everything that we thought was corrupted before we actually drew these comparisons. So I would say that if anything, it will make the results a little bit more valid. So less contamination from other sources.
It certainly makes the analysis part of the measurement data, of analyzing the measurement data, easier because of the ambient being lower.
Right. Okay, with that, we're going to conclude on item number 7. I want to thank Joe and Jean and Dr. Alonso. I appreciate you being here this evening, either live or virtually. I appreciate the presentation. We will follow up this at a TWG meeting and get back to the roundtable with further developments. With that, before we move on to the next item on the agenda, I want to take a quick moment and recognize roundtable members that have joined us since this meeting started. I should have done this a while ago, but Judith Haskell from Portola Valley, Martha Barragan from East Palo Alto are with us as well, so please let the record show that. With that, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 8, the Chairman's Update. I'll try to keep this brief because we're running a little bit behind schedule. The first thing I'd like to do, frankly, is apologize to the public for the audio disruption at our last meeting in February. The roundtable staff met with the MCTV, the provider of our on-site audio and video services, to discuss the root causes of the problem and the remedies, which included MCTV making additions and modifications to their setup checklist. And we ran a rehearsal last week, which was highly successful. I just want to note that the roundtable has worked with MCTV for many, many years, and we appreciate that MCTV has accepted responsibility for the audio problems that occurred at the last meeting, and they're working diligently to make sure that that does not occur in any future meetings. But I do want to apologize to the members of the public and to the members who were on Zoom. It was difficult. I went back and tried to listen to the recording, and I can appreciate the frustration many must have, but that is being corrected. So I just want to note that. Number 2, I did want to also do a shout out to the UC Davis Aviation Noise and Emissions Symposium. We had 3 roundtable members that attended, myself, former Chairman Sam Hindy, and Carol Ford, as well as RT Coordinator Catherine Wentworth. And I thought it was a very worthwhile endeavor. I wasn't able to attend all the presentations, but the ones I did were highly interesting, very informative, and they covered a range of topics dealing with unleaded fuel and some of the health problems with that, primarily a regional issue more so than the issue we have with SFO, all the way to climate change, to noise metrics, a lot of discussion around noise metrics, a great presentation on the feedback received on the NES presentation. I thought was very interesting, is who responded and what they were responding to, and they very well categorized and gave you a good perspective on the kind of feedback they got. There was also a great discussion on roundtable best practices, and they highlighted a roundtable, I think up in Portland or Seattle, I forget exactly where, that had some great ideas. And frankly, one of the best speeches or best presentations I heard was that of Peter Kirsch, the attorney for Kaplan, who sort of gave a summary of the history of the noise metrics, the context in which they were developed, and what they were designed to serve. And where we are, how we got to where we are now in the terms, and I think Gene made an allusion to that earlier about some of these metrics on this study, alluding based on a different time and a different era. But at any rate, those were my comments on it. HM&M were prominently displayed, did a lot of presentations. There are a number of our members of the public on this call, I think, who either were involved in the organization or a presentation of different parts of the symposium. And I would also like to know, I see Ivor is here. I think, Ivor, you'd be pleased to note that on at least one of the presentation around best practices, SFO was called out a number of times for having best practices. So I thought that was interesting. Before I go to the next item, I wondered if Carol or Sam wanted to say anything on their observations.
Symposium.
Oh, I didn't get to the symposium, Chair. My apologies.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. And then Carol, did you have any comments or observations?
Thank you, Chairman. I did. I listened to Cindy Chavez, and I know a lot of what she said wasn't factual. And the California Pilots Association is writing a rebuttal to some of the things that she said because several of us went on and listened to it. And I'm very concerned about her comments because I'm afraid people will take them at face value. So we know that there's factual evidence that she is talking about lead pollution that doesn't exist. And her study was not, the study that she referenced didn't deal with actual studies of children or blood levels or anything like that. It dealt with data, which isn't correct. So I'll give that when we finish documenting her. We're reading her comments and making comments that rebuts it, and I'll let you know when we have it finished. But I found very many parts of it fascinating and helpful, and I know Matt Friedman presented that part of it. His was very good, as were some of the other people who presented, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to have gone.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Appreciate that. Okay, the next item on the chairman's comment is a sort of a bittersweet moment. I want to take a moment to recognize and thank Ricardo Ortez, our member from Burlingame, the past chairman of this organization, who is stepping down from the city council and stepping down from this committee as well. Ricardo has been a great leader. He's worked hard. We had a lot of successful programs, particularly our SFO night in the Oakland Hush nighttime noise abatement procedures. But Ricardo's done a great job and he will be missed. And Ricardo, I just want to give you a round of applause and wish you well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a real honor being a member for 10 years and chair for a couple of those. So thank you all, and I'll miss my meetings.
Okay. You'll probably take the next one from Cabo, right? I'm joking. Okay. One more thing, and then we'll move on. We do have some additional speakers coming up over the next few meetings we have NASA on advanced air mobility and community noise. We have an industry representation we're trying to book to talk a little bit about their timelines and their projects, so it gives us a better feel for what's going on in the county. NASA Project Quest, a project to work towards a supersonic jet with a quieter sonic thump rather than a boom, as well as their plans to conduct community noise survey that I believe we'll have a presentation on that. Supersonic jets have not been around for a while, but they're making a comeback. But hopefully they're coming back with a much quieter sound, so we want to make sure we're in front of that. And we're hoping to invite, I mentioned the presentation by Mr. Kirsch of the Kaplan Law Firm. We're trying to invite him to attend here as well, because I thought his presentation was very useful and helpful to all of us, particularly a number of the members who might be new, about providing context to these different noise metrics and how we are where we are. So if you have any other topics or any other speakers in any areas, please let either me or Kathleen know, so we can provide some outreach to them and see if we can get them on a program. And then last but not least, I believe the next TWG meeting will be held on Friday, May 17th at 3:30 at the Foster City Hall. Sam, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I think that's what Kathleen, what we had planned. And so I'd encourage you, whether or not you're a member, to attend. It's a very interesting meeting, and it covers a lot of the technical stuff that we deal with. So, okay. Any questions or comments on the chairman's report from the members? Okay. I'm sorry, Kathleen.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Haney had one question.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
So just want to recognize Ricardo's service, not only former chair, but also former mayor of the city of Burlingame, for your service to the Roundtable, your leadership for all those 10 years, and more importantly, also your leadership to the community of the Peninsula and San Mateo County. You really appreciate it. You will be missed, but you've done a great job. Thank you. As far as the TWG, Mr. Chair, I definitely encourage everyone to attend. Whether you're a member or not, you're welcome to attend and participate. Definitely have a lot of important topic. Would love to see all of you and participate with us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Any other comments by the members? Okay, seeing or hearing none, we'll move on to the item number 9 on our agenda, and that's the Airport Director's Report. And we'll begin with the SFO Director, Ivor Setero, and then follow with the Aircraft Noise Management Report, Bert Cannon. So, Mr. Director, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, just thank you, Mr. Friedman, for your presentation. Really informative. I think what we'd like to do is also brief the roundtable on the preparations and policies that SFO is working on. And the equity issue is an important issue, and so we'd be glad to talk about that further. So we would propose that for an upcoming meeting. Spring break was really busy for us. We were at, for the month of March, actually ended at 96% of our pre-COVID levels. We continue to see a positive trend of passenger traffic coming back to pre-COVID levels, but operations being behind, and that is a function of larger aircraft, higher load factors, and so 96% passenger traffic, 83% operations. So that's a great trend, and this is something that SFO has always been focused on for many years, is larger aircraft, fewer operations, higher load factors. So we're pleased to see this trend continuing and hoping that it does for the future. A lot of coverage about United Airlines incidents and, you know, a very notable issue at SFO with the wheel coming off. And SFO, there's been some media coverage about several incidents at SFO, and we certainly don't see any relationship. They all appear very unrelated. We agree with the comments out of United, and we do understand the FAA is increasing their oversight, which is an appropriate thing to do at this point, but we don't see anything that is related between these incidents. Probably everyone's seen Oakland's proposal to rename their airport to the San Francisco Bay Oakland International Airport. Very concerned about that. There is a lot of confusion in air travel already. We think this creates a lot of confusion for people accessing our region, and how important and the long-standing identification of SFO with San Francisco. And so we're asking that we're being very aggressive in our ask of them not to take this action. It seems like it's the battle of the Bay again, San Francisco against Oakland, and we have a lot of support on our side of the Bay, and maybe you saw a press release this morning about all the support they have on their side of the Bay. But it just, you know, it's about the passenger and their experience. And there is evidence that this does cause confusion in Washington, D.C., for example, with their airports and other places in the U.S. So we are continuing to work through this, and we'll see how this plays out, I'll say, but we think it is a huge disservice to the traveling public. Our runway closure is, and the work going on with our taxiway reconstruction, Delta Tango, is going very well. This is a safety measure for us, and it realigns one of our taxiways that has been a source of incursions, and it is considered a hotspot. So the work is going well, even with the weather issues, and we are on schedule for a July 1 completion of that project, and then back to normal operations. And then a couple comments on service. Lynx Air, I mentioned last time they were starting service at SFO, and they have now gone bankrupt. They were going to fly SFO to Toronto, so Lynx Air will not be flying to SFO to Toronto. And then Porter Airlines, which did start up at SFO, will launch 3 times weekly summer service to Montreal arrives at 11:12 p.m. and departs at 7:40 a.m. the following morning in an Embraer 195, a bit of a smaller aircraft. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions before Bert takes over.
Thank you, Ms. Sederow.
Okay.
Let's hold the questions till after we hear from Mr. Ganong, and then we'll take them in combination. So, Bert, do you have a noise report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do. It'll be a fairly brief one. Let me go ahead and change over to our presentation. And we'll full screen this. So, wanted to do a real brief update on our GBAS. Previous meeting I mentioned we met with the Oakland Airport North and South Field Working Group, or Research Group, and that was on January 29th. We have since met with them again on March 20th. We expect that they will be bringing it back for a vote to the Oakland Noise Forum on their April 17th meeting, and I expect that we'll have positive news on that one. Again, sfo.gbas@flysfo.com for questions and comments. Would appreciate any through that or input. Wanted to go over our noise insulation program, so the repair and replacement initiative. Pleased to announce that the total budget has been increased to $1.5 million, so it's been raised by $500,000. So we're looking forward to excellent things out of that. The Second Chance Initiative, since the last report, we have had 19 homes completed in this, and proud to announce that. And our Expanded Eligibility Initiative, just wanted to show the numbers for that. Really, as you can see, we haven't had any changes. Any questions through the chair?
Thank you, Bert. Are there any questions from the memberships of either the airport director or the aircraft noise officer? Kathleen, I don't see any.
I do not see any hands raised in the room.
Okay, well, let me thank you again, Mr. Sederow and Mr. Ganong. Appreciate your reports and appreciate your updates. And if we can help you on the name change, let us know, because I would agree with you. I think that would be very confusing, but one man's opinion. Okay, with that, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is subcommittee updates. Item number 10. Since our last meeting, I think we've had one subcommittee meeting, and that is the ground-based noise subcommittee, chaired by the Vice Chair, Terry O'Connell. So, Terry, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. We had a ground-based noise subcommittee meeting on March 11th, 2024 in Brisbane at our City Hall. And we discussed with Bert Ganong and Jean Riddell from HMMH background and technical recommendations for measurements and of the ground-based noise to see if the SFO CNEL contours adequately include noise not just from airborne flights, but also from ground-based noise. We discussed the final details in the process leading to the noise data, and some components discussed and agreed upon were to go ahead and do some further collection of single event noise exposure data from departing aircraft in both A and C weighting, using noise power distance, noise to flight track correlation methodology on both runways 1 left and 1 right, using some of the portable noise monitors plus fixed monitors, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 for those monitoring stations. Runways 28 left and 28 right departures out of the gap, and using the monitors 1, 4, 6, and 18. The locations for the 4 portable noise monitors were selected within the areas recommended by HMMH with backup plans if any exact location didn't ultimately work out. And then the dates for the additional data collection are to be during the period of time around the completion of the SFO taxiway maintenance project, very likely late June and early July, with the possibility of later in July, and making efforts to include days with variable environmental conditions. So we basically just got a review of the project, of what noise we were going to be looking at, how we were going to collect it, and then bringing it back to the subcommittee at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments from the memberships, any of the members, with respect to the ground-based noise subcommittee report? Okay, I see none. Kathleen, is that correct? See any hands raised?
No hands raised.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. That concludes our presentation. So at this point in time, we're going to take public comment on all the different presentations from members, either live or on Zoom. Before we do that, or while we're doing it, Diane, if I could ask you to once again put a list up of the attendees so people know who are attending the meeting on Zoom, I'd appreciate it. And if you could also then, Diane, let me know if there's anybody in chambers or on Zoom that wish to make a public comment on the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Royce. We'll have that participant list up shortly. And currently, we have 2 speakers in the room that would like to speak, and also 3 speakers on Zoom. I'll first call on the speakers in attendance here in the room, beginning with Mr. Don Jackson, followed by Dr. Juan J. Alonso.
Okay.
Yielding my time to Mr. Alonso.
Okay, he yields his time to Dr. Alonso.
Well, actually, I appreciate the opportunity to have spoken during the presentation that Joe gave, so I don't have many more points to make, but I thought it would be good to provide a little bit of the context of why we did our study and sort of punctuate some things. So in just a couple minutes, this study was actually something that we decided to do in conjunction with the FAA to try to understand whether there were shortcomings in the noise predictions of AEDT further away from the airport. And that's thus the sci-bi microphone that we actually looked at. But we also have the data at every microphone in the sort of Bay Area that's available to us, both predictions and measurements. So we tried other places where we thought the agreement would be better, and our surprise was that in this particular instance, in arrivals and in San Francisco, the agreement was not better where we expected it to be better. So that led down a rabbit hole of lots of different things. We are very careful in doing a lot of analysis. There's tremendous amount of data. Journal papers are limited in their scope, so we cannot present all the data, but we welcome the comments from HMMH and others in order to continuously improve that data and its conclusions so we can help the FAA sort of take the right actions in order to improve the predictive quality. So for example, we did run regulatory, non-regulatory, BATA 3, BATA 4 combinations, and all that data is available. We presented the one that we thought was most relevant. There's a tremendous amount of data in over 200,000 type flights. Some, very few, like the Boeing 747-800 type airplanes, were slightly underestimated by AEDT, but the vast majority of the airplanes were actually sort of the other way around. So the 747s were predicted to be a little bit sort of louder than they really are, but the vast majority of the airplanes were predicted to be quieter than they really are. So we try to present the data scientifically, and by not picking a winner or a loser, but rather by presenting all the data and letting the readers of these reports actually draw their own conclusions and analyze the data in any way that they actually want. And last but not least, I would say that I appreciate that the comment that the paper was not peer review, which appeared in the slides, was properly explained by Joe, because this is a journal of the Acoustical Society of America. It's the epitome of peer review. So whenever you submit a paper, it's reviewed by many people. We also spent about 2 years working with our FAA program manager on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, reviewing all the data in order to make sure that the conclusions that are drawn are legitimate for the case of SFO arrivals and for the microphone locations that we examined. So we'd love to share this and any other things, but the intent here is to understand whether there's an issue with the noise modeling in the tools that we have, and to provide actionable information as to how those models may actually be improved. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Alonso. And again, I appreciate you appearing live and making time out of your busy schedule to come tonight to help us better understand the study. Thank you. Okay, are there other speakers on Zoom, I believe you said, Diane?
Yes, we'll start with Mr. Mark Scholl. Mr. Scholl, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And I just have one comment. And in reading the paper, and the authors can tell me if I'm wrong, there seemed to, in the responses to the paper, seem to focus on the two ends, which is the 747, 800, the older planes being under counted, whereas the or overcounted, whereas the opposite was with the CL 600, the Challenger. But what was interesting to me was, if you looked at the data, it seemed like the older the plane was, the more accurate AEDT was, and newer the plane was, the less accurate it was. And as you go through the various categories of planes, and I think that if that's true, that's something I think that is a trend that is important, and maybe something that really does need to be addressed. That was just an observation that I had from the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scholl. Appreciate the comment. Now, next speaker.
Yes, we have Jennifer. Jennifer, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Jennifer Landesman from Palo Alto. I applaud this study, which I think is really just the first of a kind. And I'm going to take a step back and just think about try to answer the question about what does the roundtable do with the information? What does regulatory mean? The FAA, the regulations are that the FAA is charged in making sure that they predict noise from any airspace actions that they take, or any actions that they take. And as you know, there's a lot of work surrounding airspace redesign, et cetera. And so ultimately, even the requests that the SFO Roundtable has, the actions that are being taken on behalf of airports, airlines, those are representations to the public of how noise will impact their area. So I trust that the way to solve AEDT is that path is available, and I hope that this will, happen soon. But I think that what the roundtable needs to also consider is the responsibility that local officials have in ensuring that the tools to assess noise that are making representations to citizens about risks that they may have to the noise or to their property, all of these are very important. That's why the accuracy matters. So I would emphasize trying to make sure that every roundtable member understands their responsibility for that, not just roundtable members, but obviously all elected officials. And again, thank you for the study.
Thank you, Ms. Landsberger. Okay, we have one more, I think.
Yes,
Is
we
that
have
correct?
2 more. We have Ms. Darlene Yapley, followed by Holler on Zoom. Ms.
Okay.
Yapley, you have 2 minutes.
Why do we care if ADT is accurate? AEDT is the only tool permitted by the FAA to predict noise levels. The predictions are used to determine if noise abatement or a procedure is needed to reduce noise, compatible land use, soundproofing qualification, etc. So if AET modeled threshold of DNL 65 is not met, then you don't have a problem. I want to say kudos to the roundtable and the airport for all their actions to make sure that there's better representation of impacts, moving us to ANEM and above and ambient noise. But now we need to put our attention to AEDT. What we found in the study is that it underpredicts noise for arrivals at SFO. So we do know that it didn't pick up the problems at SFO. That's still a problem. And If the fleet is unique to different airports, then the fleet should be a factor in AEDT. I also want to say that I was doing a paper. I noticed that the paper that Schultz did, Schultz with the Schultz curve, was published in the same journal as the Stanford paper. And I also want to thank the Roundtable for inviting the Stanford group to present at the TWG. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shapley. Okay.
Lastly, Zoom caller.
Okay. Identify yourself, Zoom caller, and you have the floor. Is there somebody there? Diane, do you have to unmute them, or?
Yes, I've given them permission to talk, and I've also asked them to unmute. Oh, okay.
Hello?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Can you please state your name and be helpful?
Hi, this is Sue DeGree from Pacifica. I used to be on the Roundtable, and I want to thank all Roundtable members for being there and staying in there. It's nice to see folks that have been there a long time, and thank the staff too, and also the audience, the citizens, especially Jennifer and Darlene have been around for a long, long time. I've been watching that vertical for some time, and I appreciate the report. And I've seen them, not necessarily that company, but on Facebook, and I've always said, what about noise? What about noise? And never on Facebook was noise answered. So I was very happy to see that ethics was involved and that noise was mentioned because, of course, we all care for safety. And noise, a long time at the SFO Roundtable, noise has been seen as a health detriment. So I appreciate all your work that all of you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate it. Are there any other public comments?
Thank you. That is it for public comment. There's no one in the Zoom or in the room that wishes to speak.
Okay, we'll close the public comment. Before we go to the next item on the agenda, I did want to make a note. I was remiss in not announcing that the FAA Deputy Regional Administrator, Fabi Garcia, has been with us almost through the entire meeting. So Fabi, welcome. Glad to see you here. And with that, let's go to the next item on the agenda.
Through the chair.
I'm sorry.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I think Ms. Garcia was responding to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Garcia, please.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to take a moment. I realized that Moifer did brief on the AAM workshop, and I just wanted to let you all know that we're hoping that some of the questions that you raised today during Matt's presentation, by the way, Matt, excellent briefing. Thank you for that. Maybe some of the questions for the FAA would be raised at our workshop, so I really encourage you to participate in that and tune in. If you are going to miss it, it is going to be recorded. And also, we have advertised it. I received an email. I noticed it coming in quickly with the question of how are we advertising this. So with respect to our region, we shared it with all of the senators for the entire region, the California, Hawaii, Nevada, and Arizona. So the state senators, all of the congressional delegations, all of the airports, and all of the roundtables that are known to us. So that is one way that we're doing it. We're also doing some social media on that. I just wanted to put that out there. Hopefully, please, if you get the message, if you get the information, just feel free to forward it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Okay, with that, we've closed public comment. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 11, member communications and announcements. Are there any announcements or communications any member of the roundtable wish to make? Anything special going on in your town that you'd like the rest of the members to know about, or anything in particular? And
Mr.
Kathleen,
Chair,
I'll
I
have
don't
to
see any
realize.
hands raised.
No hands raised? Okay. And anybody on Zoom? Okay. With that, I think all the members except for me are live. With that, we'll move to the last item on the agenda, and that's adjournment. But before I adjourn, I do again want to thank all our presenters. I want to thank MCTV, and I want to thank Kathleen and Diane and our entire staff. These meetings take a lot of behind-the-scenes work, and I know they've been working hard on this one, particularly to make sure that we didn't have any repeat of some of the issues we had last time. And I also want to thank the members for making time to attend these meetings. These are valuable meetings. Our constituencies depend on us to represent them and to understand what's going on. So thank you for being here tonight. With that, we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think so. I think the moving is happening.
Hi, Joanne. Sometimes it's okay to be alone. Isn't it a lot? I'm still tired of sitting.